Alright, so in this tutorial we're going to learn how to make a VR maze through Unity, but what we need to do first is actually build a maze in SketchUp. Now, you can choose whatever your maze wants to be. You can make it as complex as you want, as simplistic as you want, but either have, say you have a starting point which you go out to, or either have two end points that, say you start from one end and you have to get to the other end. All I did was go into Google, I searched up a maze, I just typed in maze in Google Images, and I just found an image that I wanted to do, this one here, and I just inserted that image into SketchUp, and then just drew over the top and extruded the walls up to a certain height, like maybe up to 1 meter, 2 meters, make it higher than the normal average human height. And that's all I did. And then I added some textures onto them, so then I had a floor that was one texture, and then I had the maze itself as one texture. Because what you're going to do, you're going to import this into Unity with all the textures to make sure that when we get into more realistic VR simulations, you've got those textures already applied in SketchUp. Now what you will need to do, you will need to use the desktop computers for this, as you will not be able to export the SketchUp file to the right file format for Unity. So what that means is that you can make it on the online SketchUp, however you'll have to put the SketchUp file onto the desktop and then export it as an FBX file to put into Unity. So once you have finished doing your maze, making it up, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's got thickish walls, it doesn't have to be super thick, but just thick enough so that your character will not fly through them. You go File, Export, 3D Model, and then you just change it to be an FBX file. So it probably will save as like a 3ds file, or maybe an something else. Just change it to an FBX file. You can save that wherever you're going to find it. So I'll just put it into IST, and I've already got it in here. And I just called it Maze FBX, so I knew what it was. And then just press Export. Actually, prior to pressing export, just check your options. Make sure you have exported two-sided faces and export texture maps. This will create an extra folder in your FBX export that will have all your textures, so then when you apply them into Unity, it will automatically apply them for you. So make sure those two options are on, and then press export, and then you should have in your file at the end, you should just have FBX file, which is just a blank, sort of like an STL file, which is just a blank 3D model, and then all your textures. So if I come in, find my FBX files, you should have the maze FBX, which is your actual maze, and then you've got all your textures in a folder. Okay. Once you've done that, you need to open up Unity, and then we can start creating our VR maze. So because I had to switch computers, I downloaded my maze FBX. So now I have that folder with the maze FBX and my two textures in here, ready to go. And I also got my Google VR for Unity available to go. Alright, so once you've done that, you've got those two files there, you've got your Maze FBX and you've got your Google VR. You are ready to open up Unity. So open up Unity, the Unity Hub probably is where you need to start. And let's create a new 3D project called VR Maze. Now I've already got the same name, so I'm just going to rename it VR Maze 2.0. And create. Once your Unity program is opened, I want you to import your Google VR straight away. So then we can use some of those prefabs that we have and that we need. So the quickest way to add our Google VR is once it's open, once Unity is open, all you need to go is find the Google VR and just click and drag it into your assets area. And it should say all this import, and press import. Now if you're using the desktops, you will need to delete some of these folders as the desktops run in an old Unity file. I'll quickly run through those now so you know. you'll need to delete the demo folder, the beta folder, and you'll also need to delete the couple of scripts in your editor folder. So if you double click into Google VR, you can click on beta, delete that. It should pop up some errors maybe. Click on demos, remove that. Delete that. And also in your editor, headset, if it says headset, remove that because we don't need that. Those are all for like Oculus Rift kind of things or something a bit more advanced than what we're doing. And you hopefully have no errors in your console anymore. If it has an error, it will tell you the path of that error. It will say Google VR, this folder in this place in this script. So you need to go to that. You can either just double click on the console error and it should pop up in your assets and just delete whatever that is. Usually it's referenced to your headset. Other than that, if you have nothing wrong with your console, if you're using a newer version of Unity, you shouldn't have any of those errors, so you didn't have to do those steps. But if you did half of those steps, you need to do all of those steps. Okay, so what we're going to do first, we're going to file save because we want to make sure that we save our project as the right thing. So we're going to save the scene. So file save as. Save it in your scenes folder, which should automatically generate when we open up Unity. And I'm just going to call it VR Maze, all one word for me. And then it should say saved as VR Maze. So in your Unity, you shouldn't have much there at the moment. I've imported my Google VR. Now what we're going to do is find in our Google VR our GVR editor emulator. So what we do is go through our search bar, we go GVR editor emulator. It should be the only blue cube there. So you just type into the search bar, find the blue cube and drag it into your world. All right. That's going to be enabling any of your movements in VR. So like your left and rights, up and downs, diagonals, whatever. So you move like a head movement. Now what you're going to do, you're going to create an empty game object. So to do that, you go to your hierarchy, you right click, create empty. And we're just going to call this our player. So we know that that's our player. And inside this, you're going to put your main camera and your emulator as a child of that player. To do that, you click on the main camera, hold shift, click on the editor emulator, and click and drag that until it highlights on the player like this, and then it should go into it like that, and it has a drop down bar. So now your editor emulator and your main camera are a child of the player. So the player is in charge of everything. Now what I want you to do very quickly is reset our transform controls. So if you click on the main camera, it says the position is 0, 1, minus 10. I just want you to click reset so it's in line with the player. Google VR, GVR editor emulator, reset those positions. And also with the player, make sure that it's on 0, 0, 0. So they should all be on 0, 0, 0. And whenever you want to move your player from now on, you just move it on the player parent and not the other two. All right, now we are up to importing our maze that we just finished making. So to do that, I'm going to go back to my assets folder and we're going to just put it into our assets folder. Now we're going to do it in a certain order. All right, so firstly, we're going to create a folder and we're going to go maze. All right, and double click into that. Now the first thing I want you to import into your maze is your textures. So your maze FBX. Now notice that my textures and my FBX has the exact same name. Now that's really important so that that maze FBX can reference those maze textures and then you won't have any importing issues or materials issues. So make sure that your names are exactly the same, no lowercase and everything is all the exact same. What we're going to do first is drag in our textures, just the folder, and it should add it into there. Then you're going to drag in your FBX file. Now it should come up like this. It should have all the materials placed on it for you. If you did that in the wrong order, your textures will not be on there for you. So you need to make sure you do the textures folder first, then the actual maze. So if you click on that, you should see down here, and I've got my maze imported with textures. Now what we're going to do, we're going to place it into the world. Now it's quite big, which is perfectly fine. I'm just going to reset the transform controls so it's at 0, 0, 0. And you can see that my maze is inside here. And you see it's up here as well, and it's got a mesh on it as well, which we'll play with a little bit later. All right, now what we need to do is place a component on our FBX. So if we go into our mesh, we should be able to place a component. And what we're going to do is going to add a mesh collider. So this is so then when our character stands on the platform, he doesn't fall through, and it also means that when our player falls down or hits into a wall, it doesn't go through it either. So what we're going to do is go add component. We go mesh collider right here. Now it's going to say add a mesh or add a material. Well, the mesh has already been placed on for us, so make sure it's the one that's with like most of the objects in there, and hopefully it should be all one thing. The best way to do that is click on FBX, and then it should say mesh one, and that's where you add the component and you have the mesh collider in there. All right, so now we have our collider in there. We should be able to have just that. You can probably click that and see the differences. So convex will mean it'll go the other way, and that's the way we want it. This way without the convex, so then it looks like that. All right, now we've got to actually set up the camera in the right position. So this place over here is going to be my entrance. What I might do is move my maze into the similar direction. I find that easier than moving the camera altogether. Notice how I did that very quickly by just using these arrows, these move tool up here on the Maze FBX. You can test where your view is at the moment by clicking on the game tab. It might be up here for you. And you can see that I'm in the floor a little bit. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to bring up my player by clicking on my player and then moving forward a little bit just so I can start inside the maze, roughly. And you notice the lighting is casting a bit of shadows. We can fix that later if we want. All right, so our entrance is set up. We've got our camera ready to go. We're in the maze at the moment. Now we're just going to test and actually make some stuff to our camera. Sorry, I'm losing my words. So to our camera so that we make our body, because we need a body. So in our camera empty objects, which is this player right here, sorry, we're going to add a couple of components. So first we're going to add a rigid body. This means that we can have a bit of gravity to ourselves. We'll fall down to the ground until we hit something. So we're going to make that, and we're going to just add some constraints to it. So we're going to freeze our rotation of X and Z. All right, so it doesn't rotate in weird ways. We're in that one spot. Then we're going to add a capsule collider. Now a capsule collider, if you zoom in to your actual object. At the moment it looks like an atom or something like that. This is where you can shape your body. So we're going to resize the capsule collider. Sometimes you can do it with the edit collider. I find that really clunky and not the best way of doing it. But height and radius seems to be the best way. So height is like our human height. Because my maze is quite big, I'm going to make myself a little bit bigger than normal. So that is actually in meters as well. So I might make myself 4 meters tall, which is quite big. And then I'm going to make my radius a little bit bigger, so I'm a bit more chunky. Now this depends on your maze, how big your maze imports. Now if you can scale down your maze, but I'd rather you not, because that can come with issues later on. So if you just do it in the way that you've had it in SketchUp, it usually avoids those issues. Now you want to make sure your radius is not bigger than the doors, so you can actually walk through things. So, and I just like to keep that human body shape and make sure it looks humaness. Now what you want to do as well is make sure that your camera is at the head. So to do that, you just quickly come into here to the player, the main camera, and I'm just going to move him up a little bit. So then in the player, it looks more like he's in the head rather than in the stomach or something like that. All right. And now we are up to the point of actually putting our only script in this project. So it's a very simple script. It's going to cause automatic movement. That when you walk in a certain direction, like you turn, you walk in that certain direction. And then when you fall off the world, you come back to the starting spot. So this is really important when we say, for me, when I finish my maze, I want to go back to the start and start again. Now there is more to this script where you could add, say, have a plane on the floor and you can stop yourself. However, I'm trying to avoid you using this script when we go into later things, and I prefer you to use teleportation. I'm just trying to show you a different way of doing it. All right, so what we're going to do in our player, we're going to go add component. We're going to go new script. But before we click that, we're going to type in controller. So controller, type in controller and press new script. And it should come up with the words controller. Otherwise, you can press new script and then type it in. Make sure you have a capital C and the same system as me. And create and add. So this should add it to your player. Now we need to actually edit it. So let's double click on here and get editing and start typing our code. Like I said, you only need one code for this. So it's very simple. So all these operating systems are going to be exactly the same. The public class, controller, mono behavior. Now you need to make sure that this is exactly the same wording as this. So it needs to have a capital C in the same spot, has no other spaces. So if you had other words, you need to make it one word. But because I just named it controller, it doesn't have any spaces. Because those are common issues with people writing in C#, that they have it two separates and it doesn't work. All right, so inside our class, what we're going to do is going to go private bool. So private boolean. So either true or false, yes or no. So our private bool is going to be false at the start. So our walking is going to be false. Private bool walking equals false, semicolon. Then we're going to have a public vector3 because we're working in 3D. That means vector 3. And this is going to be our spawn point. So we're going to tell the game or through code where our start point is. So then when we fall down, it goes, okay, that's where our start is. So to tell us where the start is, we're going to use this void start. You can remove this comment, it's pointless. So in our void start, inside these two curly brackets, we're going to have our spawn point, which is going to be our transform dot position. So what that means is wherever our player is starting, so you can move it wherever you want after you test it, and you'll be in a different position. When we fall off the world, it's going to be back into that spawn point. So if you have a maze that has a circle, that you start in a circle and you've got to find your way out, or vice versa, find the way to the middle of the circle, you can have it starting in wherever position you want. Now for your void update, I'm going to move this piece of comment. Void update, we're going to do a bunch of if statements with our ray casting and all our head movement stuff. So if we are walking, so that's linking to our private bool above, curly brackets, and press enter. Our transform dot position equals transform dot position plus camera main dot transform dot forward times 5f, so asterisk 5f asterisk time dot delta time. Like I say every time, time delta time is just helping for rendering. There's not much other purpose for it. So we're going to make our transform position move forward with the camera. That's pretty much what that's meaning. So our position is going to keep moving a certain amount of spaces, so 5 Fs, when we're looking, if we're walking. So we can come in here later and change that speed and make ourselves walk faster if we want. All right, after that if statement, we're going to write another if statement. So if our transform position dot y is less than minus 10f, we're going to change our spawn point, or bring back to our spawn point. Because this is talking about if we fall off the world, which is highly possible when we're in VR, we need to go back to our spawn point. So our transform position equals spawn point. Alright, so if we fall off our world and it's less than minus 10, it's going to make us go back to our spawn point, which is our transform position, which is our original position. Alright, now after this, we're going to go ray. So it's just our view for our camera, pretty much. So our ray is going to be our main camera. Dot viewport point to ray. New vector 3, which is going to be 0.5f, comma 0.5f, comma 0. That's just telling us where our field of view is, pretty much. Then it's got our raycast hit, raycast.hit, sorry, raycast_hit.hit. That's just to help the field of view again. Now, if our physics, so this is where we could add a bit of floor or something to make us stop moving. Now, I find this really fiddly because it doesn't always work. And when it does work, you're looking at the ground. So if you wanted something that you were looking up, say like in a ceiling of a room or something, and you want to look at what the ceiling is, you're going to constantly move. So I find this very fiddly, and this is why I prefer teleportation. But I'm just showing you how to do this so you can make this choice if you want. So if the hit.collider .name .contains the word plane, we're going to do something. So if we had the tag plane on one of our objects, so if I put it on the floor, I could probably put it, say, on a cube and just name it plane. I can stop my walking by doing that. So walking equals false. So what you could do potentially is have a bunch of objects with the tag plane, and then whenever you look at one of those objects, you're going to stop and look at it. Now, still, again, it's very fiddly because as soon as they move away from that, they're going to start moving, and they might have some issues with that. So what that's talking about is that if the collider, so if our array pretty much looks at a collider that contains the tag name plane, we'll stop walking, else we keep walking. That's pretty much as simple as that. So once you have done that, you typed in your code, press save, come back into Unity. I want you to make sure your console has none of these red areas. So to check that, just press clear again. All right, so I've got some issues. So this could be because I've typed in something wrong. I've either typed in a spelling wrong, and at the moment it looks like it's a lot about my raycast, and I found out what that error is. There's no dot. So I'm going to just remove that, save that, come back into Unity, clear that console, and I have nothing. So no dot for the raycast hit. Okay. Make sure you have no reds. If you have any reds, it's probably because most likely you've got your spelling wrong, or you're missing a semicolon, missing curly brackets in the right spots. Look at those lines from the Visual Studio. They tell you exactly what those are linked in. That's to help you understand where the childs are or what you're writing in. All right, so once you've done that, we've actually created our VR maze. It's very simple. So now if I press play and I'm in my game mode, what it should happen is I should hit the floor, and if I hold down Alt, I should be able to look and move through the world. If I hit the wall, it shouldn't make me move through it. Good. And then I can come through and I can play my maze. Now there's some things that we could improve for this. For example, we can move our light. I can increase the speed and shrink the maze or whatever. But I would probably fix the lighting first so then you can actually see the floor. So to do that, let's just make it really simple. I'm going to click on my directional light, and I'm just going to move that so it's in the world a little bit more. So make sure you put it in the right world. I might reset its transform so I know where exactly it is, and then just boost it up, rotate it. Now I find when the ground is lit up, it's a lot easier to find where it is, but this can all become personal taste. So I'm just going to put it right there. I can boost it out a bit, press play, and now I think I should be able to see the world a little bit better. But this could be fiddly, so you can see those shadows are quite dark, which ruins the feel of the game, makes it hard to see. So I would play with this directional light to get the right lighting. Now, just to test one thing so you guys can see it. So if I go to the end of the maze, if I can figure out where to go, because it's very dark, how about I just change my light a little bit so I can see it. I might make a pointing directional light so it's straight down. So you can see it light up in your world, so you can figure that out pretty quickly. I'm going to go through the maze. I should be able to work it out, hopefully. It's a rather simple maze. I'd really rather you make a more complex maze. Challenge yourselves. Notice that I slightly leaned to the left, so that's probably because I hit the wall. And it's just pulled off my bearing, so just be careful of that when you're in VR. Cool, I made it through the maze. If I fall off now, I should restart back at the start. And that's your VR maze. That's pretty much all it is. Once you've done that, you can export it to your phone, just like through the previous videos. But pretty much, that's the VR maze.